Hello and welcome to another episode of A Weekly Waypoint. Today we are playing Riiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiii I have never played Riiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiil I have played Ridge Racer Unbound, but I feel like most Ridge Racer fans will jump out at me and be like, that's not a real Ridge Racer game. I mean, okay, I just checked the reviews. It does seem to have its fans. If you'll forgive me for going on a tangent immediately, Ridge Racer Unbounded is I assume a spin-off title which used procedural generation to kind of generate racing levels. If I remember right, it's been like a decade and a half since I played it. It was also similar to Need for Speed Underground and Midnight Club in that it had that kind of late night illegal street racer aesthetic. But we're not talking about that Ridge Racer, we're talking about this Ridge Racer. And longtime fans of the series, or of this video game in particular, might be wondering how does it play to a newcomer. Well, I didn't have a Nintendo 64 growing up, I had a PlayStation 1. But I definitely grew up in this era of gaming, and there is just something so comforting about playing a game like this. Even though I've never played it before, it's still nostalgic. I feel so at home in an arcade racer with, you know, polygonal objects in the environment and, you know, this kind of music blaring over the speakers. Growing up, I'd read gaming magazines and I'd read retro columns and people talking about, back in my day gaming was different, back in my day gaming was this and I loved these aspects of gaming. And I remember thinking like, yeah, okay, whatever. But now I'm that guy. Now I'm that guy sitting here and telling you, they don't make games like this anymore. Ridge Racer 64 holds up. It holds up if you've never played it before, at least if you're 29 years old and can appreciate the era in gaming. I've always been a little bit intimidated by Ridge Racer's unique drifting mechanic as you turn around corners, but it's really not that difficult to kind of like get a feel for, and it adds a ton of replayability to stages. It reminds me of Mario Kart, how you have to master cornering and drifting and stuff, and it just adds a layer to the game which makes it so much more dynamic than if you were just turning corners normally. We are starting with the most basic cars and the most basic courses here in this video, but I do go up to, I think it's called intermediate stage for next stage, and you do get to see how they start to become a little bit more difficult. Another thing I wasn't counting on was the locked hood camera. I didn't realise that Ridge Racer 64 at least requires you to race from this point of view, and at first I was like, oh, okay, I'm very much like a camera at the rear of the car kind of gamer when I'm racing or playing racing games. Not racing in real life, that would be very dangerous, especially since I don't know how to drive. But I found myself warming to the hood camera very quickly. It really lends a sense of speed and immediacy to the driving experience. I suddenly sound really wanky as I'm saying these things, but it does. It makes battling with other cars that are around you feel much more claustrophobic, and ultimately I don't know if I would enjoy this game as much if I was playing it from kind of a third-person perspective. This game also feels like it has a little bit of Wipeout DNA in it to me as well. I don't know which came first, I don't care. But just in the whole, like, you build up speed with acceleration and stuff, but like if you just so much as touch a barrier or another racer, you lose a lot of it. It's all about racing as cleanly as possible. This is not a high-speed anti-grav racer, of course, but you know what I mean, there are similarities. And the drifting effect does legitimately feel cool when you snake round corners in an efficient manner. So yeah, to summarize, I'm really enjoying Ridge Racer 64, and I can see myself checking out other games in the series as well. I'm acutely aware that this is one of those franchises which has its N64 spin-off title, like Doom, and so I wonder how different it is to its PlayStation cousins. I mean, for all I know, this could be more of like a port job of a PlayStation 1 title. If you do have knowledge of that, feel free to let me know in the comments. But I know a lot of these, like, built for the N64 titles are a little bit more original. But yeah, it's interesting because when I think of arcade races, I think of on the one hand, you've got the kind of vehicular combat races where you collect pickups and you shoot them off at people and stuff. And then on the other hand, you have arcade races like Need for Speed and Midnight Club, where it's you know, trying to have an element of realism but still very much arcadey in terms of its handling. And I feel like games like Ridge Racer and Outrun, which I've never played as well, probably lie somewhere in the middle where it's, you know, it's a little bit more, you know, arcadey in terms of tone and how the cars handle and what you're doing in the game with time limits and stuff, but also there's no pickups. You're not firing missiles at people. I feel like it's almost a subgenre, and it's an almost subgenre that I've never really played before. Before we do get off topic, talking about other games, one last observation about Ridge Racer. I did notice the other opponents do tend to kind of rubber band to you if you slow down, making it quite easy to win, although maybe that's just because I was doing the novice courses. But then I did notice the time limit in play. While the cars might rubber band to kind of always be near you, if you do hit too many corners and slow down too much, you will run out of time, which is a nice touch. It kind of means that no matter how you're performing within the race, you'll never have that issue that a lot of these older arcade racers had, where you could get too good at the game and you would just always be in first place and it would never really be a challenge. In a similar vein, I also like how it always starts you at the back of the pack, so you're always fighting your way through from last to first through every race, so it's never really boring. But to break away from Ridge Racer for a bit, this does feed into a topic this week that I want to talk about, which is, I've been exploring NSO offerings a little bit this week. If you kept up with me last week, you will have seen that I've been in full, checking out 20 games a week mode, dipping my toe into something for half an hour and then going and playing something else. That has not really abated this week, but I will attempt to talk about it with less chaotic energy, at least. But as I touched on a minute ago, I find exploring the NSO library really interesting because I didn't grow up with Nintendo consoles. My first Nintendo console, well, technically it was a GBA, but I didn't really touch that thing. I got Earthworm Jim. My first real Nintendo console was a DS, my first home Nintendo console was a Wii, and as we've kind of been getting these N64 games on NSO, I haven't really been checking them out because I haven't really been turning my Switch on all that much over the last few years, and it is still quite a slow drip feed of titles if I'm being honest. But this week I've been loading some games up and checking them out, and it is wild because having never grown up with the N64, I was a PS1 and a PS2 kid, I feel like I'm playing games from my childhood which I never had. In a way I can't really explain. It's familiar but different. When SNES came out on NSO, I was checking out those games, it felt like reaching into the far, far, far mists of a gaming era that I barely touched because I was so young when it was current. But again, it kind of had that aura to it, that feeling of familiarity. And with N64 I feel it tenfold. I think it's just the game design philosophies and the game engines and the graphics, and it's just all so nostalgic. And like I said, they don't make games like this anymore. When was the last Ridge Racer that came out? Let me go look it up. It was that Unbounded game I mentioned earlier. Oh no. But just to give you an example, I played some Extreme G Racing as well, which might be next week's footage, and it just scratched an itch that I've had that no modern gaming release has really done. Don't get me wrong, not all modern games are awful, of course. Maybe kids growing up with today's games will, look back on them when they're 29 and be like, man, they don't make games like that anymore. Why don't they make games like Fortnite and Call of Duty Black Ops 6 anymore? God, I can't even bring myself to say it. But I have seen people talking about nostalgia they have for Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the original one. I'm like, oh, that's a game people can have nostalgia for? So that proves that point, I guess. But from my point of view, this just feels not to be, oh, it's a simpler time. But in terms of gaming, it really fucking was, because this was before they really started to get corporate and focus on milking as much money as possible and turning everything into a live service, perpetually online game. Oh, I'm sorry, these are talking points which have been regurgitated by people more cynical than me for many more years than me, but I'm just really feeling it myself right now. Games used to be made because they were fun, and they would make a game, they would make a boxed product, and they would sell the product, and the measure of success was, did it sell well? Did people like it? We will make a second one. We'll get to talking about other things in a minute, I promise. But I can't help but think about these offline one-and-done personal gaming experiences that are more simplistic in nature, and think it's a shame that, kids these days, they don't really get those experiences, and I doubt them going back and playing games in this era of games will really have the same effect that it will on someone like me who lived through it. Maybe it will, I don't know. If you're someone who's younger and you've dipped your toe into retro gaming and you've had a really fun time of it, let me know. But I know that from my perspective, I've tried NES era games, and I don't really find them very fun. I don't really have any fondness for them, but I've heard other people speak of them with fondness, like a similar kind of fondness that I have for PS1 games. I mean, Mario's fun, but Mario's always fun. And again, just to ward off any, eyebrows being raised, I'm not saying modern games are bad. I play a hell of a lot of modern games. I wouldn't even want gaming to stay the way it was at the detriment of the games we have now. It's just, the passage of time. What is the human experience without stopping and looking back and going, dang it, I liked what we had going on back then and now we don't. But I guess it's nice that we have NSO and other unofficial ways of playing older games. Those experiences still exist, or at least a version of them does, because of course we cannot recreate the full effect. I mean, we can certainly go a little bit further and invest in a CRT television and physical hardware and stuff, but we can't go back and tell everyone to suddenly, start driving old Peugeots again. I don't know, cars. I mean, if we did all throw our smartphones in the river, first of all, that would be terrible for the native wildlife, but, could be interesting. Don't throw your smartphone in a river, the ducks will write angry letters to me. And Lord knows I've angered them enough. Alright, I'm going to re-record this section of the video because I ended up telling you about every tiny little game I played for 20 minutes and then complaining about my inability to stick to one of them. Instead, let's talk about a few of them. So Monster Hunter Wilds came out last week, and a community I'm a big part of. I said that last time. I'm not a big part of it. A big community I'm part of is basically hyperfixating on that game. They're talking all about that game, but I've never been a Monster Hunter guy. I've tried several times. But as a joke, I loaded up Monster Hunter Freedom on PSP and was like, I think there's something wrong with my copy of Wilds. And then I started playing it and I went, wait, this is really fun. Now don't get me wrong, I didn't stick with it. It is an old title, it is very clunky, it's not beginner friendly, but it did inspire me to go out and pick up Rise and Sunbreak. I've played a bit of Rise before on Game Pass, and I could have continued playing it on Game Pass, but I thought, I want to own it, I want to have it on Steam, I want to be able to tackle it at my own pace without worrying about it leaving the service. Which, by the way, I'm becoming increasingly disillusioned with Game Pass. Like, it's a nice service to have, especially for, like, live service games and multiplayer games with friends and stuff, but in terms of, like, single-player RPGs and stuff, it just feels like a demo because I know it's going to leave the service in a year or two, and given the way that I personally play games, I'm not going to sit down and play it start to finish, and I'm not going to finish it in the time frame that Xbox expect people to be able to finish these games. So yeah, I picked up Rise and Sunbreak, and I won't lie, I've not got into it yet. I've taken down the bear monster, for people who know what I'm talking about. It's like the second large monster hunt you can do, and I'm having fun, but I still don't quite understand why it is so beloved. And this isn't a Rise problem, this is a Monster Hunter problem in general. Like, I'm definitely enjoying it more than I have in the past, because I know how to play the game now. It's definitely a game you need to get used to. But in terms of it clicking with me and going, I'm going to spend 100 hours in this game, I don't know. I think it's because it's a kind of action RPG I haven't played before. Like, okay, I'm about to compare it to Dark Souls, but don't get me wrong, I'm not an idiot. It's obviously not a Souls-like in any way. But similarly to games like Dark Souls, it is a game where intention matters in terms of where you're placing your character and how long the animations last and executing combos and stuff. And I've just never really gotten into that kind of action RPG experience. For me, the pinnacle of action RPG experiences is probably Final Fantasy XVI, which might be a recency bias because I played it a few months ago. I played like the first 30 hours of it at least. I say a few months ago, it's probably a month ago. But I'm definitely more hack and slash than I am like what Monster Hunter and Dark Souls is. But I'll keep at it. I don't regret buying it. I don't have buyer's remorse, and I do still want to keep playing it. Especially since Riiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiiii about how I can't stick to any game and nothing is scratching whatever itch I've got going on. That's a weird turn of phrase. I eventually sat down and went, okay, I'm gonna play Pokemon Violet off stream. I'm sorry, people who were enjoying my Pokemon Violet streams. I'm still gonna make content around it. I'm taking clips as I play, so they will show up in miscellaneous shenanigans videos. I will be reacting to things. And I do intend to do more Pokemon Violet streams in the future when I reach endgame. But for now, I was just looking at Pokemon Violet and being like, I really want to keep playing this, but I don't want to stream it right now. And then I remembered that I have free will, and so I did that. I stopped overthinking and I just did it. And again, this might not be the case in a few days, but I think Pokemon Violet is scratching the itch. For the first time in weeks, I was able to sit down and have a multiple hour-long game session playing a game and feeling satisfied and enjoying it and wanting to play more of it after I put it down. I think I want to finish Pokemon Violet and then maybe pick up the DLCs and play through them as well and just, you know, get to endgame. Ideally, maybe like in one big chunk really quickly so I can get to these Terra Raid events they're doing for special versions of the starters with Pokemon Day, but it's not the end of the world if I miss that. But yeah, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I guess I could talk about it here. I talked about it on stream, but I get the feeling that people who watch this video might not have watched those streams. I picked up Pokemon Violet on release, and I've been very grumpy about it ever since. I played it for, I don't know, maybe 5 hours or so before just going, I can't play this shit game. The performance is awful, it looks terrible, and I stand by those things. The performance is awful, and it does look terrible, and Pokemon fans did deserve better. But these streams I've been doing have been calling Learning to Love Pokemon Violet, because people keep saying there is a really good Pokemon game in there. Like, in terms of gameplay, it is a really good Pokemon game. And I just eventually was like, I mean, I paid full price for this game. It's a mainline Pokemon entry. I'm a big Pokemon guy. I should just play the damn game. And I have penetrated past that, like... Come on, you're an adult. You can say the word penetrated without giggling. I've got over the performance issues and the graphics issues. I mean, like, yeah, sure, it's still in the back of my mind when I'm playing for it. Every now and again, I let out a, ugh. But now I'm actually having a fun time and appreciating it for what it is. It also helps that last night I discovered that one of my main criticisms about the game, which is the fact that it is apparently non-linear and open world, but it still has hard set levels, and so therefore there is a proper route to follow. I've just realised you can ask someone at the Pokemon Center where to go next, and they will mark the next thing on your map that is appropriate for your level. It's an inelegant solution, but it's also a solution to my biggest problem with this game in terms of gameplay. No longer am I going, I'm gonna go see what's over here and do this thing, and then being hit with, the enemies over here are 20 levels higher than you, lol. Although I am having to deal with, oh, I missed this low-level gym, and now it's really boring because I'm just one-shotting everything. But yeah, no, there is a lot to love about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Like, the main thing is how it evolves on the wild area system that I loved in Sword and Shield with the max raids and stuff. And I said before that Pokemon Sword might be my favourite mainline Pokemon game because it actually made me care about endgame and it made me use Pokemon in my boxes without having to worry about switching up my team. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet basically build on that, and obviously I haven't got to endgame yet, but it's part of the game throughout its entirety and it's really fun. But yes, this was of course partially motivated by the Pokemon Presents we had, and Pokemon Legends CA and all that stuff. I've got a video talking all about those announcements if you want to check it out. It put me in a Pokemon mood. I checked out Stadium on NSO for the first time, which was pretty fun. I've been playing Mystery Dungeon on NSO as well. I loaded up Pokemon Go this week, which I haven't done for a few years, and we can talk about that a little bit because I've been... Did I say the word little, or did I just go... Sorry, anyway, I've been hearing about the fact that Niantic have been getting greedier over the years, and it's been more microtransaction driven than ever before, and I did see the Unova Tour, and I have a lot of criticisms with what they did there. The Unova Tour thing was... at face value, a really cool event where they flooded the open world with Gen 5 Pokemon. They had this Battle Pass system, they had community research which let you encounter legendaries, but also, if you were using the free track stuff, it lasted less than a week, and it had 100 free and premium tiers, but that's kind of a scam because you could only get 5 levels a day, meaning my calculations are probably off a little bit, but I'm pretty sure you could only get up to a maximum of 25 levels in that pass if you didn't pay for it. So most of the free tiers are just bullshit. They're not free. The event lasts an extra week if you buy premium, and premium costs £15, which is twice the price of most usual Battle Pass style systems, and guarantees you a encounter with Victini at the start and Shiny Meloetta at the end, which is just insane because you're paying for Pokemon at that point, and also Shiny Meloetta was recently made available for the first time as a reward for completing, I think it was the Paldean Pokedex in Home, but you know, now you can just get it through Pokemon Go instead, so that immediately devalues that. And this is on top of the usual stuff of, because I refuse to pay for anything in Pokemon Go, my item space is awful and makes the game feel very restricted, but that is partially a me problem. But I don't love the whole buy 50 bag spaces for 200 Pokecoins thing. I don't know, man. Pokemon Go just feels I also checked back in with Pokemon Masters EX, and that too, I was like, oh yeah, this is a gacha game. Like, it hasn't changed like Pokemon Go has. It's still what it always was, but I just wanted to see if I could use some free pulls to get the rare stuff, and of course I could not. So I'm just gonna stick to the, you know, mainline pay once, play the game games. I was playing Pokemon Violet last night, and I was like, man, I wonder if Pokemon Go like exclusive players know that in mainline Pokemon titles you don't have to pay real money for Pokeballs. What an innovation! See, some of the stuff I'm talking about here directly juxtaposes with some of the stuff I was talking about earlier with older games, and yeah, you can see where some of my frustrations might come from. But yeah, to catch you up with some of the stuff I talked about last week, so this isn't a complete non sequitur of an episode. I'm still playing the occasional Warhammer 40k Darktide match, but I did run into a problem where when you play the 2 out of 5 difficulty, it's generally a good time with randoms. When you play 3 out of 5 difficulty, it's not. We usually fail, and the problem is that certain stages are locked to certain difficulties, so if I do just want to stick to 2 out of 5, which still does give decent XP, I have a much more restricted set of maps which are going to grow stale quickly. Also, I just don't think I enjoy those Left 4 Dead Horde monster style games as much when they get difficult. I don't know if that's a difficulty I enjoy tackling. I did play some more Warhammer 40k Bolt Gun before it left Game Pass though. I realised part of the reason I was having some difficulty with that game is I forgot about the melee attack, which is kind of important actually, but it subsequently left Game Pass, so now it just lives on my Steam wishlist. I did mention at the end of my first Gotrek and Felix review that I am gonna give it a break for a minute so I don't burn myself out on the more pulpy style of fiction, and I have instead been reading through the first Mistborn book. It's a reread, but I've never listened to the audio version, and yeah, it's always really fun to reread a story with foreknowledge of where things are gonna go, and you can pick up on subtle bits of foreshadowing that you didn't before, or not so subtle. Also, I finished The Flash Volume 2, The Speed of Darkness, the Rebirth era one, but I don't know if I'm going to post a graphic novelties about it, just because I don't really have a lot to say about it. It was fine, and I don't want to flood the channel with things that I don't have a lot to say about, so I might save the graphic novelties reviews for things that I actually have active things to talk about. I am now reading through Watchmen, so that'll probably go on there. I am also continuing to read Tales of a Sun Eater Volume 1, after which I will read Tales of a Sun Eater Volume 2, after which I will read the 4th book, which is apparently very traumatic, so I've got that to look forward to. Anyway, that's a better second half of the video. I'm happy with that. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you have a great day, and everything you want to happen happens, as long as you're not some kind of supervillain. That would be unfortunate. Anyway, bye!